Hi, my name is Fraser and welcome to GPU Solutions. In today's video, I'll show you how to fix memory errors on an AMD GPU. For this demonstration, I have an XFX Merc RX 6900 XT. Now, if your PC powers on but all you get is a black screen, that's a classic symptom of memory error. So let me first walk you through how I identify such an issue. The process is quite simple. First, remove your GPU or just disconnect the PCIe power cable. Then, connect your display or HDMI cable to the motherboard. Turn on the PC and while it's starting, keep tapping on the delete key or the F2 key to enter the motherboard BIOS. Inside the BIOS, set your internal GPU as the default graphics output. Now, install the GPU if you removed it or reconnect the power cables and boot into Windows. Once inside, go to the Device Manager and under the Display Adapters, you'll see your AMD GPU listed. If there's a yellow exclamation mark on it, double-click to open Properties. Here, you'll usually see error code 43. That error is a telltale sign of a memory fault. At this point, if you're just a regular user, it's best to book a repair with a qualified graphics card repair technician. But if you're curious how the repair is actually done, let me show you. I've installed the RX 6900 XT onto my test bench and I'll be booting into Linux, which I use for AMD Diagnostics. Now, unlike Nvidia GPUs, which use tools like MAT, mods, and NVMT, AMD GPUs use a different tool called MemTunes. So I open the terminal, navigate to the RX 6900 XT directory, which in this case is named R69XT, and I run the command /memtune space training check. This script runs in the background and tests the memory channel. And in this case, the output shows failures on E0 and E1. Now here's something important to note. On AMD GPUs, channel E0 and E1 map to the same physical memory module. So we've narrowed it down, the faulty chip is on channel E. From this stage forward, let me be very clear. I do not recommend you attempt this repair unless you already have solid experience with BGA reboarding. Trying to remove or replace memory chips without proper skills can cause irreparable damage to the PCB. If you want to learn, practice first on dead boards or old GPUs. I will not be responsible for the damage you cause on your own hardware. Now, let's disassemble the GPU so we can access the PCB. With the cooler off, you can see that XFX has applied black epoxy around the bottom memory modules. The purpose of this epoxy is supposed to secure the memory in place so the contact with the PCB isn't broken. But here's the irony. This RX 6900 XT failed despite the epoxy. In my opinion, it's pretty useless. No matter what they apply, over time, the weight of these heavy GPUs, especially mounted horizontally, eventually causes contact issues anyways. And all the epoxy really does is makes the repair process more difficult. On AMD's RX 6800, 6800 XT, 6900 XT, and 6950 XT, the memory channel layout goes in sequence. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. Since a fault is on channel E, this is the chip we'll be working on. Let's take a closer look under the microscope. Here, you can clearly see the epoxy surrounding the E-channel memory chip. The first step is to carefully remove as much of this epoxy as possible. To do this, I apply some heat to soften it. At the same time, I need to be very careful because there are tiny SMD components all around the memory. As you can see, I managed to clear away some of the epoxy without damaging the surrounding capacitors. Now, for the actual chip removal, First, I preheat the board to 120 degrees Celsius. Then, I apply flux around the memory module. Next, using hot air at 420 degrees Celsius with 60% airflow, I began heating the chip. This melts the solder underneath and also helps loosen the epoxy that's under the package. At this stage, there is no way to save the memory module. It has to be replaced. To check if the solder underneath has melted, I gently test nearby SMD components. If they move, I know the solder is ready. Now, with tweezers, I insert into the center of the chip and carefully lift it. This part is purely based on judgment. If you lift too early, you risk pulling the pads off the PCB. But here, as you can see, we've achieved a clean lift. There are some gray pads on the chip, but that doesn't matter since the chip won't be reused. With the faulty module removed, it's time to clean the area. First, I apply flux to prevent oxidation. With my soldering iron set to 380 degrees Celsius, I tin the pads and scrape away any leftover epoxy. Then, I use solder wick to flatten the pads so the surface is clean and ready. Now, I prepare the replacement memory module. I apply flux to both the chip and to the PCB pads. I carefully place and align the chip. Once it's perfectly positioned, I use hot air again at 420 degrees Celsius at 60% airflow to reflow the solder and secure the new memory module. The key during this step is controlling the heat not by temperature settings but by distance of the nozzle from the chip. Once the soldering is complete, I let the board cool fully. After cooling, I install the GPU back onto my test bench and run MemTunes again. This time, the result shows no memory errors. Perfect. Now, I change the BIOS settings back to boot from the discrete GPU, and this time we get display output. The GPU is alive again. Next, I clean the PCB thoroughly, removing all the flux residue. I apply fresh thermal paste to the GPU die, then reassemble the cooler back onto the card. Now, let's verify our work. First, I ran FurMark to check the thermals. Next, Superposition benchmark to check stability. And the score looks good. Finally, I run 3D Mark Steel Nomad and 3D Mark Speedway for a full stress test. Everything passed out without any issues. That completes the repair of this XFX Merc RX 6900 XT, and this GPU is now ready to go back to its owner. If you learned something from this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to support my work, you can join in as a channel member or use the thanks button as a one-time contribution. Your support helps me create more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye for now. Cheers.